Everybody, welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me tonight, it's Ron the Mad Dog McCleese. What's up, Mad Dog?
Hey, it's great to be back, and just talking a little chatter, before we went on air. It's been just one of those weird seasons, and, just overcoming all these injuries, the loss of big-time players like David Johnson. I think that it's kind of like a true testament to, you as a fantasy player is just being able to grind it out and find some guys and some hidden gems around, along the way to kind of continue to push towards the playoffs. So that's where we're at right now, and it feels good for me because I'm, a few of my home leagues I'm right up there. Most points, best record. So the payouts are nice, but
careful, Ron. You might strain your arm, patting yourself on the back there.
Right. I mean, you still got to win in the playoffs. So even with the bye, you don't really ever feel that comfortable. So it's nice to have a bye week where you can kind of sit back and maybe build some more DFS lineups, and because of that little extra free time that I might have. But
yeah, absolutely, and that is one of the nicest things about when you have teams that don't make the playoffs. A little more time for DFS, and the states that allow it, and the states that don't. Hopefully, that changes really, really soon. Tonight, Ron, we have a DFS expert. You hear him on the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast, dropping tons of amazing, super helpful knowledge. All around good dude. It's Ben Cummins. What's up, Ben?
Way too kind. What's going on, guys? Always love talking football with you. Pumped to be back. Like we touched on, we talked before the show that, redraft can get a little stale at times. But and of course that's where the DFS love comes, because every single week is completely new and you got to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But obviously we are looking at redraft in a DFS mindset now. Hopefully everybody out there made the playoffs in at least one of their leagues, and that stale feeling goes away, right? Because now it's do or die, and we've put all of these ad drops, trade negotiations, and our emotions have gone into these players, and you're hurt for me. Come on, we need you back, and all of this. And now it's do or die. And so hopefully you guys made the playoffs in at least one, and hopefully you can pull out those victories. And hopefully what we talk about today can help a little bit with that, because again, I love the DFS feel every week, and that's what we're doing now. So hopefully we can kind of bring some of that into your season-long thought process and maybe help you make a decision that you're struggling with, or maybe help you play a player that you wouldn't really consider normally that absolutely is in play this week. And I think there are some interesting situations, especially with some suspensions and injuries and all that you guys touched on. So let's get into it.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to kind of have a mixed bag of dynasty and redraft and DFS, and be able to kind of have an open mind and not get locked into, a dynasty mindset where you're thinking about, the future, or a redraft where you're like, oh, I need to play these superstar players and not take your shots on guys like Marquise Goodwin who end up, balling out. So
yes,
we're just going to go position by position, throw out a few names. If you guys have anybody you want us to talk about, definitely let us know in the chat. Ben, Ron, if you guys have names you want to throw out, don't hesitate. We'll talk about the mess that is the Giants. Obviously, won't touch on Jerry Reese and Bob McAdoofus getting the oust. But Eli is back under center. I guess, Ben, are you just running and hiding from this Giants offense? Is Eli someone that could be in streamer, consideration for you this week? And then kind of, what does it mean for Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard and all that stuff? Where are you at?
Well, first of all, I'm just happy that Eli's back. And McAdoofus, I love that. The dude is a complete moron. They should have fired him. They should have never ended the streak. I like Eli Manning, and that love started. I've come to respect the New England Patriots, but back in the day, I hated them. Absolutely hated them and hated their success. And Eli Manning beating them in 2 Super Bowls just made me love the guy forever. And he's not a great quarterback, but he has been a good quarterback for a very long time. And I just hated to see how that went down because it just made no sense. And everybody's touched on this, but if you're going to bench him for somebody other than Geno Smith. And so and it's just so stupid because now he's back. The coach was fired. Like, why did you let that happen? It just really bothers me to my core because I do like Eli Manning and I do like some of his pass catchers. And this is kind of the DFS mindset. Eli Manning has been so cheap for so long because Odell Beckham and Brandon Marshall are out. I actually kind of like him as a quarterback this week in DFS at $4,800 on DraftKings. He's been up and down with weapons, but Evan Ingram's in there and Sterling Shepard is in there. And I think that, more specifically for kind of our discussion tonight, I think it might be easy for some people that have Sterling Shepard and are in the playoffs. It might be easy for them to feel like they can't trust him, but I think you absolutely can. Obviously, he had the mind grade issues, and that, that's not taking anything away from his play on the field. When he's been out there lately, since Odell Beckham and Brandon Marshall have been gone, he's been a target hog when Eli Manning has been the quarterback. And I think that their games sync up really well together. And now that Eli's going to be starting again, I don't think you have to worry about it because, again, Eli's not great, but he's a good quarterback, and he gives you that, safety. He's going to be able to hit Sterling Shepard there in the middle of the field, and we know the Giants like to throw. Now, McAdoofus is gone, but I don't necessarily see that completely changing. So yeah. I think that, there's probably people out there making tough decisions with their wide receivers, and I absolutely believe that you can trust Sterling Shepard this week in a pretty good matchup against the Cowboys pass defense that isn't very good. So that would be my main takeaway. I would not be relying on Eli Manning in season long if you're in the playoffs, but DFS, a little bit of a different story. You can save some salary there as well. And I think Evan Ingram's totally fine. I mean, he put up good numbers with Geno last week, so I think he's in a good spot too. If you don't have a better option, don't overthink it. He's been a target hog all season, and that shouldn't change now with Eli back.
Yeah, and I think if you're in deeper leagues and, somebody dropped Eli thinking the kind of magic was over, now he's back under center. He's a guy that could make sense if you're kind of scrambling. We'll throw a few more kind of streamer names out there, but I think he could be in the conversation for sure. Ron, let's go to Detroit and talk about the Lions. Matthew Stafford left that game with a hand injury. I guess, are you kind of expecting him to play? And if he's not, is Golden Tate, Marvin Jones kind of out of the question for you?
I'd expect him to play. I mean, the hand's not broke. I definitely would somewhat, temper my expectations for him, especially, anytime you have that type of an injury as a quarterback, I mean, you're taking hits constantly. So my main fear, I guess, would be, if that hand gets hit really hard again, multiple times during that game, if it point where he can't just take the pain and they can't shoot at halftime and make him feel any better to get through. So that
sound effects in my background. Yeah. It's a situation you want to monitor. I think if Stafford plays, you can feel okay. If not, might be a run for the hills kind of situation. Speaking of a situation that might have some, kind of worried is Russell Wilson versus Jacksonville, Ron. Russell Wilson's been balling out. People are talking about him as, an MVP candidate or the MVP candidate. But a tough matchup on the road versus Jacksonville. Are you just playing Russell Wilson and not thinking twice?
I am, and I kind of, off air, we were talking about it last week. I benched T.Y. Hilton, against the same Jags secondary because I didn't like the matchup, and I thought, he hasn't been consistent. But I guess my point here is that, yeah, it's a great defense in Jacksonville, and yes, they have to travel. They're playing them, at their home stadium there in Jacksonville. So for me, I mean, Russell Wilson's just been too good. I mean, he's been one of those guys. I mean, Ben brought it up and keeps saying it, and he's right. I mean, it's do or die right now. I'd like to, kind of add to that. It's do or die with your ride or dies. And for me, Russell Wilson's been that guy for me all year long.
Yes.
He's just getting it done, man. Like, this guy's, I mean, he's just putting up those numbers. He's the number one QB right now as far as scoring goes, I believe, or if not, one or two.
Nope, he's number one.
Yeah, there's no reason for me to, at this stage of the game, get all funny and start, making, changes to my lineup and taking out a guy like Russell Wilson just because of the matchup. I mean, who you mentioned Russell Wilson for in a 1 QB league? I mean,
you're going to feel real dumb if you put Jimmy Garoppolo or Case Keenum out there and Russell Wilson balls out and those guys
exactly
have a less than ideal performance. So, yeah, I think we're all on board with Russell Wilson. Play him if you own him. He's got you this far. Hopefully keeps you going. What about Dak Prescott, Ben? We saw a much better performance a week ago. Now he's going on the road against a Giants defense that, kind of on a week-to-week basis, we really don't know what to make. Sometimes they look like they want to try. Sometimes it looks like they're kind of over the season and the way it's going. You think they're a little more aggressive this week, maybe with McAdoo out, knowing, okay, the future is maybe a little bit brighter, and, Tyron Smith's back and looks a lot better for the Cowboys. What are we doing with Dak?
Man, this is a tough one because I am a very big Dak Prescott fan. But so last week the Cowboys obviously performed a lot better. But if I'm not mistaken, Dak still only had like 100. Do you have the numbers right in front of you?
So he was only 11 for 22, 102 yards and 2 touchdowns.
He had the 2 touchdowns. Okay, yeah.
And Ben, he has that bruised hand too, so I just want to throw that in there.
Oh, okay, yeah. We were just talking about that with Matthew Stafford. Yeah, it's tough. I don't know if I could necessarily trust him because obviously, I thought that when Ezekiel Elliott got suspended, I saw Dak Prescott because I'm such a fan. I really do think he's a good quarterback. I saw him taking the next step in terms of him taking command of this offense, but really, obviously his numbers have not been very good. And what we saw last week was Dallas winning the exact same way that they have been winning with Ezekiel Elliott. Their blueprint has not changed. They want to run the football. I believe Alfred Morris had 27 carries last week. If they can find success doing that, they're going to. And if they can't find success in the run game, then that's where we've seen, and it hasn't been just one game, where this entire offense sputters because Des Bryant is still very good, no matter what Twitter will tell you. He's
like a wide receiver 2-3. He's okay.
Right. He's pretty good, but other than him, there really are not very good weapons in that passing game at all, other than Terrence Williams being the greatest GPP play of all time. But that's once in a blue moon. Other than that, he doesn't really have anything. Yes, the matchup is pretty good, but I really haven't seen in this sample without Ezekiel Elliott enough for me to play Dak if I have another option that I like, because I know that the offense wants to run through the run game, and I know that when that's not working, it's really, Dak having to do it on his own because he doesn't really have the weapons. You're basically praying for him to have the rushing upside, which we know he has, but the rushing upside, guessing when he's going to have a rushing touchdown, is harder to predict than I think looking at some of these other situations. So I'm not very excited about it in a do or die. Trust in your ride or die.
Yeah. I think the last few weeks, Dak's proven that he's not at that Russell Wilson level. I think Dak, I think Stafford, there's a few guys kind of in that category that just look for better options. Now I'm going to throw out a few names. Ron, tell me which one's your favorite. Jameis Winston versus Detroit, Josh McCown at Denver, Jimmy G at Houston if you're digging deep, and Andy Dalton at home versus the Bears, your Chicago Bears. Was there a name that stood out for you as a guy that could make a lot of sense this week?
Is that Dalton? Is that Bengals Bears game? Where's that game at again? I should probably know that, right?
That's in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I kind of do like Dalton, but I'm probably going to side with Winston. I think we saw enough for him last week. I know the Lions defense, they've been kind of up and down all around. They've made some big plays earlier in the season, but they've been vulnerable. And especially, if what Ben's talking about kind of comes to life here with no Stafford, I could see Winston having, plenty of time on the field because that offense is going to be sputtering and they're not going to be able to sustain any long drives. So I think that kind of bodes well for Winston and that whole Bucks offense in general. I'm going to go Winston here just because I think there's still a little bit more upside with him and his all of his playmakers. But I think Dalton's definitely a great pivot there. Also with the matchup, and we all know the Bears. Again, the reason why I asked that question was they just play a lot better defense when they're playing at home, and when they're on the road, it's kind of a different story. So.
Yep, and we saw Jimmy G move the ball really well, even though they didn't find the end zone. Moved it really well between the 20s. So put him at home. I think it's a good option. Ben, is there a name for you there? Is it Dalton? Is there another guy that stands out?
So the thing about Josh McCown is he's kind of good at football.
He seems to be actually good.
Newsflash.
Yeah, and I've actually had this opinion for. Probably dating back to when he actually put up stats in Chicago with Alshon and Brandon Marshall. And I actually wanted my Broncos to go out and get him before last season started because when he is healthy, he's actually kind of good. And, all the jokes before the season were put out there, but he's actually stayed healthy. And, it shocked me when I was looking at this and I decided to play him as my cash game quarterback last week. But and that obviously worked out really well. Love the guy. But he's and I think I haven't checked since. I probably need to, and this would probably be a good tweet. But and I don't think it has because of how good he played last week. But going into last week, McCown had more touchdown passes than Drew Brees, Dak Prescott. I believe Matt Ryan was on that list. Cam Newton. There was a couple others as well. So he's playing very good football.
Crazy.
And look, I am a diehard Denver Broncos fan, but I pride myself on being a realistic Broncos fan. And this is one of the most pathetic seasons that the Broncos have had since I've been alive. And we look on paper and we can't play them against Denver. Denver still pretty good statistically against the pass, but they are bleeding points. They are bleeding touchdown passes. The yards aren't great, but they are bleeding touchdown passes. I think Josh McCown can keep it going because this is a lost season. I don't see the heart. I don't see the passion. And that's why I like Josh McCown on that list.
So I was looking at the stats, and McCown is, it's a lot of the quarterbacks you named in terms of passing touchdowns. Drew Brees, Derek Carr, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, Case Keenum, Eli Manning, Blake Bortles. Jameis Winston obviously missed time, but yeah, he has more touchdowns. The thing that I love about Josh McCown, and the thing that's impressed me most, he is currently your clubhouse leader for most rushing touchdowns by a quarterback. He has 5 rushing touchdowns on the season. He's in the same.
Wow.
Him, Cam Newton, Marcus Mariota, Dak Prescott, and Deshaun Kaiser all have 5 rushing touchdowns. One of these quarterbacks is not like the others. And
on top of all that, I'm almost positive he's top 12 in passing yards in the league. On top of all that.
Yeah, no.
Some underrated weapons too, though. He's thrown the ball to. I think we don't give enough credit to guys like Robbie Anderson and Curse.
Jermaine
keeps doing it.
Curse,
man. Seriously,
come back from the dead.
Josh McCown is your QB 7 right now. That's unbelievable.
That's why I would play.
Yeah, so I think McCown's definitely a guy that, don't be scared of that Denver matchup. Robbie Anderson, obviously, and we're good playing Jermaine Curse, right? Balling out the past 2 weeks. McCown clearly trusts him before the bye. I think if that's a guy, if you're looking at, some options, if you're, if you're scrambling because, you might not have, Golden Tate or something, I think he's a guy that could make a ton of sense.
I like it.
I think in deeper leagues, before we move on to running backs, I do want to say Jimmy Garoppolo, I think it isn't the worst idea. If you
agreed,
I think there's a plenty of opportunity, and if you're playing in some of those GPPs, I think that's another place.
Yeah, baby.
That's right. Let's talk running backs. Is Peyton Barber a thing? Is he going to be like a guy down the stretch where fantasy owners are going to play him in the playoffs and he's going to help them win leagues? I mean, this is a guy that had 20-plus carries last week. Doug Martin has been terrible. Barber looked good. Ron, I know we've talked about Barber in the past, and he's kind of, flown under the radar, never really got a shot. It looks like he's getting a shot, and it looks like he's flourishing. Is he a guy you trust this week versus Detroit?
You know, for me, I think for all of us out there as owners, volume is king. And if any guy's getting volume like this, 20 plus carries, and he had the 2 touchdowns the week before, so they've shown that they trust him in those situations in the goal line. So I mean, even if he's not getting that volume, if he can find the end zone, fall into the end zone a couple of times, or at least once, plus catch some balls out of the backfield. I think he had like 4 receptions, I want to say, last week.
Yep.
For 41 yards, so on 4 targets, so he caught all of them, and that's kind of a phase of his game that no one really expects from him. So, with Rodgers kind of going to the wayside, and he kind of got his shot early in the season, he didn't, really do anything with it. Then Doug Martin came back, muscle hamster, did his thing for a little bit, and then, again, he's hurt again, so he's on the shelf. So, again, I think opportunity is definitely key right now. If you look at players that have gotten the opportunity at the running back position the last few weeks, P. Ryan's been a good example of one that's been able to come out there and do it. We're going to talk about another one here in a second. I'm not going to show my hand, but yeah, I mean, Peyton Barber for me, he's definitely a guy that I will go out there and pick up. I picked him up, aggressively bid for him in our fake pigskin dynasty league last week to get him.
Mm-hmm.
I spent all the rest of my money to get him, but yeah, I think so. I think this is a guy that I think I can trust. I think this matchup is one that, they're going to trying to control that clock and grind it out, even if Stafford is playing, trying to keep him on the sidelines in that offense. So I like this game, and I think that the game script could kind of get out of the way and early on, and I think that he could get a lot of carries later on, trying to ice this game away.
Yep. The other guy that Ron was alluding to is Mike Davis up in Seattle. 16 carries, 64 yards, average 4 yards a carry. The Thomas Rawls, Eddie Lacy experience, I believe, is dead. J.D. McKissick got a carry, got 3 targets. He'll be evolved a little bit, but Ben, this is another guy that if you're looking for a running back, I know it's Jacksonville this week and it's not a great matchup, but it seems like there's potential, and he could, especially if assuming Seattle stays close enough, or gets a decent lead, Mike Davis might get 15 to 20 carries.
Yes. And I know I'm guilty of this, and I know I'm not the only one. It is so easy to overthink it, especially when the pressure's on, like this week, when you have to make the right decisions and you have to win. And, this goes for Peyton Barber too. It's like, a Seahawks running back when I have to trust somebody, or Peyton Barber on the Buccaneers. Like, that just sounds like the most boring play in the entire world. But as Ron said so eloquently, volume is king, and it's king in DFS. It's king in redraft, especially when you have to win this week. I think that you are looking for those guaranteed touches, because you got to get those guaranteed points. You really cannot leave that much risk in your lineup when you have to win. And, of course, your situation. If you're the 6 seed playing the 1 seed and they're a lot better than you, sure, you might take a risk here or there and hope for some upside, but you can overthink it in that scenario. And what you want to do is just lock down those touches, because with touches come points. It's pretty simple. You have to touch the ball to be able to score points. That's what happened last week with Peyton Barber. And if Doug Martin is out again, boom, there you go once again. And that's the same thing with the Seahawks. And you might be thinking, well, that's a little bit different. But if you look at, and it's a small sample size, but it's one that I personally believe you can trust. Mike Davis comes into the primetime game a couple weeks ago. He's the starter. They just called him up off the practice squad. He looks really good. He gets hurt. Okay, well, that's over. And as soon as he gets healthy, which was last week, he comes right back in, and he is the guy. Just like you said, he is the guy. Eddie Lacy, I think, gets 1 touch. Rawls gets 1 touch. McKissick catches a touchdown. But in the running game where, yes, it's been a headache all year, but all of a sudden the stars have aligned, the clouds have opened. We see this beautiful rainbow that is, I can't believe I just said that is Mike Davis, because you can count on his touches. Yes, you can count on his touches. And yes, it's been a weird situation all year, but we just talked about you are not benching Russell Wilson.
Nope.
Okay, because he, in my opinion, is the MVP of the league. So now we have Mike Davis, who is correlated to the MVP of the league that not only is getting those carries, and you look at him and you don't really think about him as a pass catching back because there's McKissick and, he looks pretty big, but I believe 4 catches last week. You got Russell Wilson playing, backyard football with him, telling him where to run, hitting him, and he's going 30 yards down the field. So you have a dual threat running back that plays with Russell Wilson. Yes, it is a tough matchup, but volume matters more than matchups do in general, especially now when you have to be able to count on these guys to get those touches to take you to the next round of the playoffs.
Totally. And people forget, but 2 years ago, Tim Hightower was winning fantasy championships for people because he was getting all the volume in New Orleans. So
he was tied to Drew Brees like Mike Davis is tied to Russell Wilson.
Yep. You want those great offense, the guys getting volume and really good offenses. Ron, your boy Aaron Jones returned last week, ended up finding the end zone in overtime. I guess if you own Jamal Williams, are you concerned about Aaron Jones, kind of cutting into that work? And, in super deep leagues or dynasty leagues where you own Aaron Jones, is he a guy that you'd consider playing this week?
I think Jamal Williams, he definitely has shown that he can be that back to kind of do it all right now for the Packers. And let's not forget, they're fighting for their playoff lives here every week. So it's do or die for them every week. And I think that they got to trust Jamal Williams right now to handle the majority of the workload. I think it's going to be more of kind of sprinkling in Aaron Jones here and there because he does bring that, dynamic face to his game when he's out there. He only had that 1 carry last week and, went 20 yards for the touchdown. So that's kind of, what makes him, a good play. Maybe not so much in fantasy, but I think more maybe in DFS if he's, low ownership, more of a tournament play. But for me, I think it's Jamal Williams right now, and I think that they're just going to, sprinkle in a little bit of Jones here and there. But I wouldn't be surprised if he found the end zone again. But he just won't have that volume, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and I think as we've talked about, volume is king. So, if you're scrambling and you need a body, Aaron Jones could be that, and you just hope he finds the end zone. But you can feel pretty good about Jamal Williams. Ben, what about C.J. Anderson? I don't know what to do with the Broncos running backs. You're obviously invested in this team. 15 carries, 67 yards. He got 4 catches for 43 yards. Was this just a blip? Is Devontae Booker going to get back into his, kind of usual share of the load, or where are you at with this running back field?
Yeah, no way, shape, or form would I want to be relying on a Broncos running back in the playoffs if I didn't have to. Just literally not interested at all. If you have no better options, then C.J. Anderson and Devontae Booker should get some work, and their running backs, so the touches are a little bit easier to predict. But that is the issue, is that their playing time has been up and down, and so it's a lot more murky than those guys that we just talked about. And on top of Devontae Booker's playing time starting to rise and then all of a sudden falling back down, and now is it C.J. Anderson? I like C.J. Anderson as a player, but you can't trust the usage because the other thing that I'm not sure how many people saw or not, and it wasn't like I just saw the tweet, was the Broncos were actually dealing with, a lot of players were dealing with the flu last week, and apparently Devontae Booker was one of them. And there was a tweet that came out after the fact. I'm not even sure who it was, but I believe it was a verified account that was saying that probably one of the reasons that he thought Devontae Booker's playing time fell back down was because of Booker being sick and having the flu. So you don't know. You really don't know. And it's just not only that, not only do we have questionable usage concerns, but we also have a horrendous offense, bad. Yeah. And you don't want to, I don't like tying my, success in fantasy football to players on bad teams in general, and especially not in the playoffs when it's do or die.
Yep.
The fact that, real quick, Ben, the fact, to piggyback on your point, the fact that last week I had to think about starting Mohamed Sanu over Demaryius Thomas, that was just uncalled for. And I was like, what am I doing to myself here?
But it would have been the right move.
I think it's a legitimate question at this point.
Yep, and that's why people like Mike Davis and Peyton Barber are a lot more interesting. I know you spent a high draft pick on C.J. Anderson, but move on. Andre Ellington, I want to throw out as a name if you're in a PPR league and you need a running back. The Texans are dying for wide receivers. They probably not going to have Will Fuller. They lost Bruce Ellington. They lost Braxton Miller. And so Andre Ellington basically played slot receiver for him, had 5 catches, 56 yards. Can be useful in a matchup where he's going to have opportunities the Texans are going to have opportunity to throw the ball. So if you're scrambling in PPR leagues, he could be a name that makes sense. Ron, if Alex, go ahead.
Wait, real quick. They lost Braxton Miller. Did he get hurt last week too?
Yeah, Braxton Miller got hurt. Bruce Ellington got hurt. Bruce Ellington was placed on IR. Will Fuller's probably not coming back this week. They were literally scrambling to put any receiver. I mean, that's why Steven Anderson, who we're going to touch on a little bit, got so many targets.
I think Will Fuller's dead.
Yeah.
And if you guys see him or hear him again,
he saw Tom Savage is out there playing quarterback, and he's like, why even bother?
I didn't know Braxton Miller got hurt too. Wow.
Yeah, he finally got a shot, and he was actually looking pretty good for a couple.
I was about to throw him out. Like, I think it might finally be starting. Maybe you can play him in a pinch. I didn't know he got hurt. Wow.
Yeah, nope.
And then I'm looking at it. Ellington, 6 targets, 5 catches, 56 yards.
Yep.
I like it. That's a good
and
nugget.
most of that
right
came in the second half too. So it may not be a huge yardage total, but it could be 5, 6, 7 catches again. Another 50, 60 yards, maybe falls in the end zone, and all of a sudden you have a really nice value in PPR.
I like the call, Kyle. He's just
Appreciate
transitioning over to Houston for his role that he had in Arizona. It seems like.
Yeah, well,
we'll see how many targets are there to go around after DeAndre Hopkins gets his 39. So.
Yeah, when one Ellington goes out, you got to replace him with another. If Alex Collins misses this week, Ron, is it Danny Woodhead? Is it Javorius Allen? Is it Terrence West? Is it nobody?
Yeah, I'd prefer not to. I mean, Ben brought it up. I mean, at this stage of the season, you got to have better options. And I think the Baltimore Ravens backfield is
a Steelers.
It's a hodgepodge of who's spin the bottle, and we don't know who on a week-to-week basis is going to get the carries, who's going to get a touchdown when they do get on short goal line opportunities there. So to me, I would stay away. I mean, I guess in PPR maybe look at Woodhead and maybe a shot in the dark, for my guy Buck Allen, but I'm kind of giving up on him.
Buck Allen, I don't know. I'm a Buck Allen truther, and I thought that he was going to completely go away once Woodhead came back, but obviously he got that touchdown out of nowhere in prime time a couple weeks ago, and then I believe he saw 7 carries last week, which was more than Woodhead. So if you're in a very, very bad position, and if Collins does not play, I think that there's enough bankable volume for Buck Allen, but still on the road. Steelers.
It's a Steelers team without Shazier, which makes me a little more maybe.
Yes.
But
yes. But still Woodhead's not going away either. So don't do that to yourself unless you absolutely have to.
Yep. And the other name I want to throw out before we move on to receivers, Gio Bernard. If Joe Mixon misses, is another name that could make a ton of sense. We obviously saw him take over when Mixon went out with his concussion and had 77 yards rushing, looked pretty solid. So, it's really going to be a monitor practice reports. Peyton Barber, Mike Davis, Gio Bernard is probably my order. But if any of the starters come back and cut into that workload, it could really jumble that. So at FPAOP, we'll be tweeting out stuff. Hopefully you can get a couple of these guys on your roster and kind of pick and choose when it makes most sense. Before we talk wide receivers, I want to thank our friends over at Draft. Fantasy sports fans, listen up. If you miss the playoffs, your season's over. That may not be the truth, because you can still play at Draft, where 80% you're winning 80% better. Your chances of winning are 80% better than most salary cap sites to DraftKings and FanDuel. Come play a draft. You get all the fun of the draft. You go, 5-man leagues. You can get a bunch of your buddies. You can play with strangers and take their money. And, you get 5th pick. And now you're getting Drew Brees. And you can pair him with Michael Thomas on the way back. And have a ton of fun. More than 1 million people have already downloaded Draft. You can also play NBA. So if you're a basketball fan, you can do a draft on there for NBA as well. Drafts are done under 5 minutes. And you get paid out the next day. Not only that, if you sign up for a new account, if you don't have a Play Draft account, use the promo code FakePigskin. Whether you download it from Google Play, you download it from iTunes, you go to playdraft.com/fakepigskin, you get a free real money entry by just depositing $5. Not only that, you get a year of Fake Pigskin Elite, our premium service, all of our DFS content, all of my rankings, and a lot of my columns, a lot of other columns, a lot of great stuff on Fake Pigskin with draft coming, with fantasy baseball coming. You want to get involved with draft. Go there, sign up for an account, deposit $5. You won't regret it. Let's talk some wide receivers, and we'll start with Mr. Juju himself, Juju Smith-Schuster. He had a suspension upheld today, so he will miss this week's game at Baltimore. A Ravens secondary that will be without Jimmy Smith, a guy that when he's missed in the past, the Ravens have given up a lot of production, a lot of yards. Obviously, Antonio Brown is going to be a beast this week, and I think if you're setting cash game lineups, should be one of the receivers you definitely target. But beyond there, Ben, Eli Rogers, maybe we go the Martavis Bryant well. Are you interested in either of these guys this week?
Yeah, I'm interested in Martavis. Martavis is somebody that I never gave up on. And as soon as he came back from the suspension, it's not what we wanted it to be, but he's getting 4, 5, 6 targets a game. Mm-hmm. And you're getting at least one deep shot in there that gives you a chance to have a pretty big day. And, you said it, man. No Jimmy Smith, no Juju Smith-Schuster. Martavis is going to be a pretty big part of the offense. If I'm remembering correctly, he caught a touchdown in primetime a couple weeks ago when Juju was out with his injury. And I don't think that that's a fluke. I think that Smith-Schuster being out, or Schuster-Smith, or Smoots, whatever John Gruden wants to call him, it is a big bonus for Martavis. And Eli Rogers, I'm just going to go ahead and say no. Obviously, it depends on how deep we're talking. In that game, in primetime when Juju Smith-Schuster did not play, I did play Eli Rogers in DFS because I thought that I was being sneaky. And I think that the process was right, but there just wasn't a ton there, and there just hasn't been a ton all season long. Obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster plays the majority of his snaps in the slot, and that's what my thinking was when I played him in DFS that week. And Eli Rogers was on the field for the majority of snaps, almost the entire game in that game. So he will be on the field, and it is a good offense, which gives him a chance, but at a position that's a lot harder to predict than running back. Peyton Barber, okay, we know he's getting 15, 20 carries. That's easier to rely on than an offense in Pittsburgh, where I think I saw a tweet that like 60 to 65 to 70% of the offense is literally two legends: Antonio Brown, the best wide receiver in football, and Le'Veon Bell. Yep. So it's really hard to find scraps after that. And the only one that I would trust or like having in my lineup in a playoff would be Martavis Bryant. Depends on Eli Rogers will be on the field if you're in a dynasty league and if he's out there and you don't have a great roster or whatever. That's where I would maybe throw that one out there.
Yeah, it's really fire up the killer bees and kind of avoid everyone else.
Yes.
Ron, we mentioned we're all in on Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin, Paul Richardson, Jimmy Graham. Are you comfortable rolling these guys out as well?
I'm 100% confident in rolling out Baldwin and Jimmy Graham. I think Richardson's one of those guys that you're a little bit more risk involved with him. Even a guy like Tyler Lockett. I mean, if he doesn't score a touchdown or break a big one, or score a punt return, kick return touchdown, then what is he really going to do for you? He's not going to get that many targets. So those guys, I think, are more of, I wouldn't say desperation plays, but I don't love the matchup for them. But I think that, again, Russell Wilson has proven to kind of be matchup proof. He's having that, QB1 season that we brought up earlier. So, again, I mean, I benched Hilton last week against this Jags secondary, and I regretted it. and you got a guy like Russell Wilson throwing the ball to guys like Doug Baldwin and Jimmy G, yeah, I think they're going to be in your starting lineup. They should be.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Ben, on the other side, Marquise Lee, Dede Westbrook are with the banged up Seattle defense. Are these guys a little more in play than they normally might be?
Yes, they absolutely are. I really hope that Allen Hurns does not come back and cloud this up a little bit.
Yeah.
But Marquise Lee has been just somebody that you can rely on. He's had bankable volume, is what I'm trying to say, all season, because Allen Robinson goes out. Allen Hurns has been banged up, and he's finally been healthy, and he's been getting it done. And then Dede Westbrook comes in 3 games, gets 6 targets in his first game, 10 targets in his second, and 9 targets in his third. So that to me is bankable volume, because if Allen Hurns doesn't come back, they really don't have a tight end presence that's consistent in any way, shape, or form. So we know the majority of those targets are going to Lee and Westbrook, and that's what we've seen for Lee, a bigger sample size, but even for Westbrook, we know Westbrook was a very good college player. He had 2 games in the preseason this year with over 100 receiving yards. He comes in and he's instantly producing in regular season action. It's in Jacksonville, and on top of that, obviously, like Seattle's defense, it's crazy, because I'm sitting there thinking, wow, they lost Averill and Chancellor and Sherman, and they're going to kind of be a shell of themselves. They have so many good players on that defense. It's unreal. Mm-hmm. But the majority of them, other than Earl Thomas, are still in that front 7. So there are some holes with Jeremy Lane and company. Shaquille Griffin did impress me a little bit on Alshon Jeffrey at times this past week, but I absolutely think that with the volume the process would tell you that you can get out of Lee and Westbrook. If you don't have better options, which there's a chance you don't, I do think that you can play them and you don't have to shy away. Yeah. Of course, then it comes down to Bortles.
Who actually hasn't been that bad. And if you listened to me last week when I told you to stream,
he's been all right.
You would have had a top 5 option. Ron, Tyreek the Freak Hill, 6 catches, 185 yards, 2 tutties last week. Obviously a monster game versus the Jets. This Chiefs offense has been struggling a little bit, but Hill, he's basically the last 3 weeks is 7-7 and 6 catches on 27 targets over that span. Are you comfortable putting Hill back in your lineup? Do you think this offense has rebounded a little bit?
The Freak is back, Kyle, so I'm definitely putting him in my lineup. I mean, he never really left my lineup because he's just too explosive type player. Yeah, Alex Smith had a stretch of games there where it seemed like that whole offense in general was just like stuck in middle gear. They couldn't get it going. There was nothing going, and it's kind of perplexing. But I mean, you brought it up. I think anytime you see the targets there for a guy like Tyreek Hill, I mean, the targets are there. So he's going to make some big plays, and that's why you want to have him in your lineup, because when he makes those, it only takes one big play, to pay off. Yep. And, if he hits a couple of those, then you're really, doing backflips. So, yeah, he's in my lineup. There's no question. And hopefully he can be one of those guys that kind of helps you get to the big one,
yep.
through the playoffs.
Totally agree. The Dolphins have a nice matchup against the Patriots this week. Devontae Parker is dead to me. Like, just stop playing him. But I think Jarvis Landry's in play, and I think Kenny Stills is in play. He keeps getting all these targets. Obviously, had that big touchdown at the end of the game a week ago. I think you can comfortably roll both of those guys out. Ben, Marquise Goodwin, Trent Taylor. I know we both said that we kind of like Jimmy G if we're digging deep, or probably in some GPP. Do you trust both those guys to get a good number of targets in a nice matchup?
Yeah, Trent Taylor's tougher because he was in and out of the lineup. He was hurt there for a couple weeks. I believe came back a couple weeks ago, and now Jimmy G comes in and he's producing. And I don't think that that's a fluke, and I think that's why this is a very good question, because I was interested in Jimmy G in tournaments last week because I do believe he is a good quarterback. No pass touchdowns last week, but almost hit the 300 passing yard mark, and then was perfect throwing to both Goodwin and Taylor. I think he was 6 for 6 to Taylor and 8 for 8 to Goodwin. So, Taylor, somebody in deeper leagues kind of along that Eli Rogers viewpoint, but I think the bigger point for me and the bigger takeaway is I think you can trust Marquise Goodwin. Marquise Goodwin has been a starter in this offense all season. Pierre Garçon is now gone, and there's really nobody else that you can really trust other than potentially Taylor now meshing with a better quarterback. And I touched on this last week when I was interested in Goodwin in DFS is I thought that the quality of targets was about to vastly improve. And I think that's exactly what happened and is what will continue to happen. The matchup against the Texans is not that scary. You have a full-time player, a guy that can get behind the defense and, go for 83 yards, which we saw a couple weeks ago against the Giants. So I do think there's a lot to like because you have quality of targets, full-time player, he's on the field, and he's been getting the volume pretty consistently. There's been a little ups and downs, but I think that the volume is pretty bankable now with a better offense, with a quarterback that you can actually trust getting him the ball. So Goodwin, I have no problem playing him and relying on him in the playoffs in a do-or-die matchup because of all of these factors. If your wide receivers are a little bit shaky and you have decisions to make, I don't have a problem locking in Goodwin at all.
Yeah, he should see volume, and he, like Ben said, he's actually getting targets that much better quality, a lot more catchable balls. It's, a good thing for him. Let's talk Ron's favorite favorite topic before we get out of here, and that's a good tight end. Rob Gronkowski is
smart man.
Yeah, his suspension was upheld for the one game, so he will be out this week. No Martellus Bennett, who's on the IR. Don't fall for the Dwayne Allen trap. We saw this, this season.
Correct.
Dwayne Allen will be on the field a ton, but he's in there to block, and it's going to be, probably Danny Amendola. Is that who we kind of like to get a little bit of a bump here?
Amendola, Burkhead, just they'll game plan, and Dwayne Allen will not be heavily involved in that game plan.
No. Jason Witten, however, if he's available in your league and you need a tight end, I love him this week. The Giants are the worst team against the tight end. He had 7 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown in week 1. He's got like 20-something targets over their past 3 matchups. Witten will get the ball a lot. I know we don't love Dak, but I think he'll find Witten enough, especially in PPR leagues. I think he'll feast. Digging deeper, Ron, Cameron Brate comes back. Jameis Winston's there, and all of a sudden, the touchdowns are back. He only had like 3 catches, but 2 of them were touchdowns. Is Cameron Brate a guy that you're comfortable rolling out the rest of the way?
It's been rough. It's been a rough patch for me, obviously, with Fitzpatrick kind of going to O.J. Howard. We saw that chemistry, that connection kind of take off, and then here we are again with Winston coming back. He's another week healthier, hopefully. Yeah, I don't know what the, level of trust is with Bray right now, but I would say that, with Winston back, you got to feel a lot better about putting him out there. And, to your point, I love a great tight end, but it seems like they've kind of been a few and far between this year with the injuries, with just underperforming. So, yeah, you're forced to, start guys like Bray. And believe it or not, I actually benched him last week for Higbee, and I was just so mad at myself that I'm like, all right, Bray, I'm not going to bench you again. Yeah. Winston's back, but I just wanted to see a game from Winston, see that he was healthy, see that he's going to be able to, reconnect, have that chemistry with him that he, created so much of last year. So it's definitely still there, but I wouldn't be shocked either to see, maybe go swing the other way this week and see O.J. Howard find the end zone a couple times.
Yeah, you've been banging that O.J. Howard drum. I just not with Winston, not today. Beyond him, Steven Anderson had 12 targets. We talked about that banged up wide receiver core in Houston. He got 5 for 79 with a touchdown. Ricky Seals-Jones, he doesn't get a lot of targets, but when he does, a lot of times he'll find himself in the end zone. And Ben, we talked about, Zach Ertz might potentially miss this week. So if you're an Ertz owner, I think Trey Burton's a great player just to add, and you can do the automatic swap once we know Ertz is out.
Yes, my boy. I've been infatuated by Trey Burton for a couple years now because I think that he is talented, and I if this ends up coming to fruition, I'm gonna wish I was screaming it from the top of mountaintops even more. But I did talk, I think it was before the season started, about how Trey Burton is one of my favorite deep dynasty league ads because if anything happens to Zach Ertz, Trey Burton steps into one of the most valuable roles in fantasy football that nobody's talking about.
Yep.
And it was hilarious to me when Zach. This was gonna sound terrible. I was gonna say when Zach Ertz gets hurt. That's not what the hilarious part is. When he was out and Trey Burton comes in and starts catching all these passes, and the announcers are like, "Oh, this is the number 3 tight end." I'm just laughing because, okay, technically, if you want to call it that, but there is one direct replacement for Zach Ertz, and it's Trey Burton. It is not Brent Selleck. So to me, Trey Burton is the number 2 tight end, and then we have the Selleck of Philly, which is kind of like Dwayne Allen, in New England. And there is no. It's not a coincidence that Zach Ertz is balling out this year. The tight end position in this Doug Peterson offense is very, very vital, and that doesn't change when Ertz goes out, like it can in New England and things like that, because they have a player the stature of Trey Burton that can step in and all of a sudden start catching passes left and right. He caught a touchdown when Zach Ertz missed earlier this season. He did that last season against the Bears earlier in the year, and he was catching passes this week. He's talented. He plays in a very good offense. And to me, if Zach Ertz is ruled out, Burton is your stream of the week at the tight end position, and it's really not close for me.
Yeah, and he's a guy in DFS that makes a ton of sense.
Yes, I will have plenty of him.
Yes, even in cash. Ron, let's say Zach Ertz plays. Do you prefer OJ Howard to Ricky Seals-Jones to Steven Anderson to even Cameron Brate or Jason Witten?
No, I mean, Witten would be my top guy because I really feel like Witten has proved time and time again he's the target monster, and I think that he, more often than not, it seems like he's been outscoring Dez for the most part. If Dez doesn't catch that touchdown, it's going to Witten more often than not. So I think for me, it'd kind of be Witten, Brate, and then I'd have Howard right there, and then kind of the rest of those guys. I really wouldn't want to have to be forced to start any of those other guys like Seals or any of the other names you mentioned. But
what about Safarian Jenkins? Denver's really bad against the opposing tight ends. Safarian Jenkins has kind of had his moments, but been quiet as of late. Ben, are you jumping back on the ASJ train?
I'm definitely writing up ASJ in tournaments for that exact reason. The Broncos cannot cover the tight end position. They have no idea how to cover the tight end position, and they're a pathetic train wreck this year. So if there was any week that ASJ was going to bounce back, I already talked about liking Josh McCown. He is intriguing. His the quote unquote reliability and this feeling that we get when we plug a guy in, that fascinates me. But it has been pretty tough, I feel like, lately, and so it would not make me feel warm and fuzzy inside to look at him in my season long roster where I'm trying to win a championship and it's a do or die game. But in tournaments, he's absolutely in play at a low ownership, and it makes sense because of the matchup. If Ertz ends up playing and somebody else picks up Steven Anderson or whatever, and he's been your guy, yeah, I mean, you don't have to overthink it. He has a good matchup, and he has a chance to get in the end zone. Hopefully they don't overturn this touchdown that he catches.
Hey, since Ben, he's able to take a shot at his own team, I'm going to take a shot at my own team real quick. And in the same vein as Ben's statement, the Bears, I mean, opposing tight ends score on the Bears. I'm going to throw a name out there, Tyler Kroft. I know he's kind of a no-name, but the guy, he does score touchdowns, and Dalton looks his way and trusts him. So, if they're bracket covering AJ Green coming off a monster game and betting on someone else to beat them outside of Green, I think that guy this week could be Kroft. So just another guy I kind of throw in there, kind of towards the bottom of that list of names that we've we put together.
Yeah, if you're shooting for a touchdown, he's definitely in play. Another guy that could make sense in that same vein, there's a good chance that Hunter Henry doesn't play this week. Hunter Henry, who's 14 targets, 76 and then 81 yards the last 2 weeks. We could see a old man Gates revenge sighting, and he kind of wobbles out there onto the field and scores a touchdown against Washington. So the Redskins team that's been struggling against tight ends. So. Well, I think that'll do it for us, guys. It was awesome to have you back, Ben. Tell everyone.
So much fun, guys.
Yeah, for sure. So if you play DFS and you're not listening to the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast, you're doing it wrong. But you should definitely check that out. Ben's got some great nuggets, and it's stuff that even if you don't play DFS, can be useful for your season-long leagues, for your dynasty leagues, all that good stuff. As
you must not like to win money if you're not listening, right, Kyle?
Right, exactly. And I think we all like that winning money. As you can see below his floating head, Ben Cummins FF on Twitter. Make sure you throw a follow there. It's definitely worth your time. But for Rod the Mad Dog McCleese, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next week.